Good evening, viewers. My name is Octavia Timbes, and I'm the project coordinator of MyZone. We are here live at Namibia University of Science and Technology to cover the panel discussion under the theme, The Role of Media in Contemporary Democratic Societies. So if you are interested in media, if you are a grade 12 learner, if you are a varsity student, please do stay tuned and tag your friends, share our video, and be informed. Thank you.
The Namibia University of Science and Technology is driven by its vision to be a premier university, preparing leaders for the knowledge economy. The university remains committed to being responsive, creatively meeting the needs of students, society, and the economy through multiple pathways for excellent education, applied research, innovation and service in collaboration with stakeholders. Situated in the center of the Windhoek city, the university boasts state-of-the-art facilities to support its teaching and learning, research and services. To achieve the socio-economic goals set for Namibia in Vision 2030, the university offers 90 under- and postgraduate market-driven qualifications, developed in close collaboration with the industry, national and international partners through its 6 faculties. The Faculty of Computing and Informatics offers bachelor's, bachelor honors, master's and PhD qualifications in computer sciences and informatics. As one of the oldest faculties on campus, the Faculty of Engineering hosts the Material Testing Institute that provides advanced education through the continuous professional development, applied research and consultancy in different engineering projects. The Faculty of Health and Applied Sciences provides professional programs aimed at improving public health through diagnosis, patient care and management, emergency medical care and care for the environment, as well as natural sciences, mathematics and statistics. The Faculty of Human Sciences consists of the departments of Communication, Languages and Education and Social Sciences and offers, amongst others, qualifications in journalism and media technology and criminal justice. The Faculty of Management Sciences is the largest faculty and hosts 2 postgraduate units, the Harold Pupkewitz Graduate School of Business and Namibia's Graduate School of Accounting. The Faculty of Natural Resources and Spatial Sciences impart knowledge and skills in its graduates required in the sustainable utilization and management of natural resources, contributing to a sustained national economic growth and competitiveness. The faculty's strategies and actions are aligned to ensure they remain relevant to the Namibian nation and the global society through the Integrated Land Management Institute and the Agribusiness and Technology Development Center. The university also hosts the Center for Open and Lifelong Learning, the Cooperation Education Unit, and the Teaching and Learning Unit promoting academic excellence. Research and innovation are supported by the Namibia Business Innovation Institute, the Technology Transfer Office, Innovation Design Lab, and Fab Lab Namibia. Namibia Energy Institute, NEI, a national institute founded by the Ministry of Mines and Energy, hosted at Namibia University of Science and Technology, envisages a sustainable energy supply structure based on widespread use of renewable energy. The Namibia Energy Institute is unique in that it not only is a training and capacity building institution, but also conducts research and development. It is becoming increasingly clear that the climate change is an inevitable process. Increasing climatic variability would have serious implications for the supply of food, energy and water, which forms the basis of a self-sufficient economy. The impact will be amplified through the interconnections and interdependence among these three resources, popularly known as the Food Energy Water Nexus. NUST intends to address the Nexus challenge by investigating technology options to address food and livelihood security in both urban and rural contexts. Hence, looking into substance solutions as part of a mixed livelihood strategy, which requires an integrated model strengthened by indigenous knowledge systems linked to highly competitive technology advancement and adaptation options. Namibia is endowed with natural resources required for renewable energy supplies from the sun, wind, and biomass from invader bush. NUST will continue to contribute to the knowledge pool and clean energy development pathway in order to inform scaling up the use of renewable energy and energy-efficient technologies. NUST will advance the development of decision support software which will enable clinicians to adhere to best practices research, including research on small wireless, biomedical sensors and ultra-wideband radar technology, as well as portable ultrasound technology in support of early detection, treatment and management of diseases. The Namibia University of Science and Technology is at the forefront of investigating the next decade of operational and commercial reality in logistics. Namibia University of Science and Technology, Research for Impact, the hub of innovation, an institution par excellence.
Because we'll be having an interactive and, by the looks of things, recorded session, I could perhaps invite those who are at the back to sort of form a much more, I'd say, interactive and integrated community up in the front and middle row seats so that we can have nice Q&A going somewhere along the way. If we are too spread out, it might be a little bit difficult to get the mics up when it's question time. You may have seen from the program that we have a very esteemed panel, both of practitioners and academics. And we hope that we'll be able to unpack some of the issues that irk us or perhaps cause concern for us in respect of the media in the context of democratic states. As many of you are aware, the continent is perhaps in 2019 home to many elections. At my last count, I think there were more than 20 elections that were going on across the continent. And one of the indicators of trouble in paradise often is when you get the internet and all forms of external communication being shut down as soon as elections are around the corner. My last, I think, news brief somewhere along the last few days was an explanation from one of our continent's leading states that the reason for shutting down the internet and access to all forms of media, particularly social media, was because people were influenced to incite violence. So for their own safety, or for our own safety, the state then shut down the media. We also know that at the time when we are close to election, oftentimes there is a conflict, often violent conflict, and this has affected many ordinary citizens, unfortunately, particularly those who are vulnerable, young children, women, and it's been a cause for concern. So I hope some of these issues may come into our discussion, if not at the panelists' behest, at a point in the discussion when our largely youthful audience raise these issues, because the issue of democracy also is critical to our general well-being. And seeing as most of us are young in the audience, it will be good to know how you reflect on the issue of your rights, if one could say that, as young citizens who in future will be invoking your electoral rights and exercising that. I'm told that we are expecting one of our colleagues with students, so I'm rambling on in the hope that they'll walk through the door, and once they come through the door, we'll proceed. But perhaps while they are on their way, I can just sort of read a little bit of the headliner that is the background to this discussion. For those who may not have been able to read it outside, the brief goes as such: media organizations have the responsibility to report news in an objective manner and to inform their audiences without bias. In democratic societies, they have a central role in ensuring that citizens are able to hold the government, organizations, and powerful individuals accountable. The aim of this panel discussion is to inform and engage students and the general public on the role and responsibility of the media in dynamic and changing environments. Now, that's a loaded statement, if you ask me. A bit, as you can see, on the older side of things, so I'm not very au fait with social media, for example, but again, one of my recent grapevine suggests that there's trouble again in another paradise. This comes in the form of the ongoing discussions around the conduct of the American elections, which saw President Trump come to power, and the role in particular of Facebook as a corporate entity. Into our lexicon also has come in the idea of fake news. I'm never quite sure whether there was anything truthful about any stories in the first place that we found. We always were told that all media reports were lies and damn lies, like statistics. But I think the idea of fake news crept on many of us almost without our understanding, but it's something we've had to come to grips with. And we're engaging with that concept on our own continent in respect of reportage around elections, both pre and post-election. So it is something that is obviously troublesome when you also look at the phenomena that is called the World Wide Web, Internet of Things, and how we actually construct realities, whether they are virtual or real, in terms of news making or news production. So it'll be quite interesting to hear from the experts their own views about these things, and being mindful of the time and that we really don't want to stretch beyond our given time. I will let the colleagues who are to join us perhaps join us as and when, as I do not see them coming through the door, but I think I've got a healthy audience. It's a little bit skewed to my left. There seems to be emptiness on my right. So that's the way things happen, but here we are. So ladies and gentlemen, let me first start by welcoming you all to this panel. On behalf of our executive team, in particular the Acting Vice Chancellor of NUST, Mr. Monedi Toit, and Executive Management, I'd like to welcome you to this event, which promises to be quite exciting. I recognize in particular our Deputy Vice Chancellor, Dr. Andrew Dikondo, who is going to be speaking later on in the program. And hope that by providing this platform, NUST is demonstrating its very deep commitment to not being an ivory tower, institution out there detached from the rest of our community, but in fact being a very community-embedded institution. And I'm especially proud that our Faculty of Human Sciences hosts the Media and Journalism Technology Studies program, which I suspect comes out of this event. I also recognize colleagues across NUST, in particular colleagues from the Department of International Relations, who I believe are the brainchild behind this event. And I especially welcome warmly our speakers, who I will introduce later. Without much ado, I will first want to welcome our Deputy Vice Chancellor Academic Affairs, Dr. Andrew Nikondo, to make his welcome remarks. And thereafter, I will introduce the speakers who will also be ably handled by my colleague and expert in journalism, Dr. Hugh Ellis, who will serve as your evening's moderator. I, at this point, would like to welcome Dr. Nikondo to the podium, and then we'll take things from there. I promise you a very lively event, so please gear up your questions and notepads so that we can have a very vibrant discussion. You'll be recorded, so be aware of that. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much. The panelists, myself, I'm not a journalist, and I've I mess up things with my speech. Please bear with me. I'm unusual when it comes to this type of media and journalism. So I only hear people say they hate them. I don't know why. Yeah, so that's what I hear people say. So firstly, let me thank the Dean of the Faculty of Human Sciences, Prof. Alina Sehobia, the Head of Department for Communication, Prof. Makamani. I'm wondering if he's here. Maybe he's coming. Esteemed guests, the panelists, members of the media, staff and students, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and a warm welcome to you all. Firstly, I'm very happy to open this special event of media discussion at NUST. And I would like first to thank the organizers of this event. And I would also like to thank the audiences. As I can see now, the hall is almost full. But when I came in here, it was empty and everyone was a bit skeptical about what was going to happen. Now I'm very happy. And I really thank you all for making time to witness this important conversation about the role of the news media in our dynamic contemporary society. If I quote Article 21 of the Namibian Constitution, which stipulates that all persons shall have the right to freedom of speech and expression, which shall include freedom of the press and other media, unquote. So during this panel discussion, I wish we will discuss a lot of challenges that media development and media freedom face at this time of digital transformation, a transformation that also has enormous potential for media in Namibia and elsewhere. So we need to look at a different aspect of this new reality, which can bring many possibilities for new and diverse media to arise and to contribute to the democratic development of societies. Furthermore, we should also examine the challenges for media and gender. I like always to have gender in this because media and gender is one of the contemporary issues that people are discussing. You find that when the media houses are covering their news, most of the pictures that you see in media, only men and women are left out. If you see a woman, it's only when there's an advertisement, then a woman is there. Therefore, here I'm saying the challenge for media and gender, for the future of journalism, for the financial sustainability and sustainability of the media, and for the quality of information of the citizens. Freedom of media and freedom of expression are indispensable foundations for democracy and rule of law. Therefore, opening the media landscape, allowing more space for diverse media, even if we are facing so many difficulties and challenges, is a necessity for Namibia, if not for the entire SADC region. I'm also convinced that freedom of media, openness, and access to information will be supportive of economic development. Free information and the circulation of ideas equally encourage innovation and new initiatives in the economic field. Hence, respect for freedom of the press is a key to attract international investors to Namibia or to the region. And for this to happen, we need legal frameworks and media policies that are enabling media freedom, that are supportive of diversity and pluralism, and that accept the role of media to investigate, to report freely on issues of public interest, and also to hold those in power accountable. I think this one I need to underline it. To hold those in power accountable. Because when a story is published in media, really, those in power will know that what they are doing is now known, and accountability is also ensured in that respect. In order to place freedom of expression and media freedom issues higher on the agenda, on the political agenda of government, we all need, first of all, to join hands. We need this open and frank discussion like this one with even all stakeholders. And that's why this media discussion today that we are having here today is extremely important. Today, Namibia must not miss the media engagement of this nature. It is vital for the future of information, of democracy, and of the economy of our country and other countries as well. So I believe that a mature dynamic and vibrant media landscape is a condition for quality of information and even democracy. If I quote one writer, Malcolm X, once said, "The media is the most powerful entity on earth. They have the power to make the innocent guilty and to make the guilty innocent. And that's power, because they control the minds of the masses," I unquote. With these few remarks, I would like really to thank you all for being here and contributing to the debate today. And I also look forward to the discussions ahead. So, although I'm really not going to stay here probably up to the end, I will be seated here for a couple of minutes to see how everything is rolling out. So, I just want to thank you again for your coming. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nikondo. I think with those warm welcoming remarks, we are ready to roll, as they say. Let me take this opportunity to thank our partners who are co-hosting or co-supporting this event. Namibia Media Holdings, one of our key partners. As you see with their banner, they are here fully represented. And I'll speak a little bit more to their work later. But I'd also like to thank B360 Education Partnerships, who are also a co-supporter of this event. And I'd like to believe that one of our panelists, Dr. Hess, is here in that regard. A very quick overview of our speakers at the top table. Starting on the extreme left, or my extreme left, is Mr. Denver Kishting, who is a journalist with more than a decade's worth of experience, I believe, in the media. He's currently a senior journalist at The Republican, which is a paper that is part of the Namibia Media Holdings, our current partner here. Some of you may know him from the NBC breakfast show, which is called Good Morning Namibia. And he has also worked at various other media places, and I believe he brings to us an expertise and wealth of knowledge that will speak to his own lived experience in the practice in the newsroom, in front of the camera, and elsewhere. Next to him, and perhaps for your noting, we were expecting Mr. Franz Ngetila, who unfortunately could not join us due to unforeseen circumstances. Next to Mr. Kishting is Mr. Kazembwa Shibaruro, who is coming also from the Ministry of Information and Communication Technology. He's also a seasoned journalist with a postgrad diploma in international journalism from City University of London. He has extensive experience in the media, having also worked at the NBC and various other print media houses. So he also comes as a practitioner, but also I would say a keen expert of news and media reporting in Namibia. Our third speaker will be Dr. Nicole Hels, who is one of our guest lecturers from the B360 Partnerships. She comes to us from Switzerland with diverse experience, but currently she is the Deputy Secretary General of the Federation of Migros Cooperatives, which is FMC, and is a freelance culture manager. Previously, she worked as a cultural editor for the new Zecha Zeitung. I hope my pronunciation is good there. and the Tages Anjaiga. She's also got experience in the area of film and has done various other work, perhaps in the area of media reporting and other public engagement. Last but not least is our colleague in the faculty, Dr. Philip Santos, who is a senior lecturer in the Department of Communication here at NUST. He also has experience not only in the newsroom, but also in other media areas. He's a journalist by training with teaching experience in media studies and has research interests in a variety of areas, including political communication, gender and development, and digital media. There is your panel, dear audience, and I believe that in the order they've been presented, they shall present their representations, self-representations. We are starting just a few minutes after 7. They will have about an hour to share their experience, and we'll have a Q&A session. And as I said, they will be handled ably by Dr. Hugh Ellis, who is a lecturer in the Media Studies Department, in the Journalism and Media Technology Department here at NUST, who will then be taking them through the Q&A session. So you're more than welcome to jot down your notes and questions or whatever comments, and at the end we'll have a very interactive session, which I hope will provide for the lively debate we all came here for. Thank you very much for your attention.
Have the simplest job here, which probably involves saying the least. I'm the moderator of the discussion, and I'd like to start by welcoming Mr. Denver Kisting to the podium to give his presentation. Each of the panelists have, I think, 15 minutes to make their presentation. Yeah, you're welcome, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis. Thank you also to the Master or the Mistress of Ceremonies. Good evening, Namibia. A very good evening to all ladies, gentlemen, and gender non-conforming persons. I would like to abide by the protocol as established earlier. Let's just make sure that everybody sits comfortably and can see comfortably. Is that where we are at? The panelists, if you want to turn around, you can do so too, as long as you're comfortable. Okay, very well. Just to bear in mind, it has been shared with you by the Director of Ceremonies that these proceedings are being broadcast live on all the online platforms that's on Facebook Live of Namibia Media Holdings. Our primary space will be the zone, that's our youth focus, but we're sharing all of that simultaneously on all the other platforms. So for those of you at home or elsewhere watching us, very good evening to you too, and welcome. I would like to, there seems to be a challenge at the back. Mr. Smith, can you respond to that perhaps? Mr. Smith could perhaps hotspot you, Zoe, if that's an option. Unfortunately, there's no free Wi-Fi if you'd like to tweet, but you could make arrangements amongst each other to hotspot one another. As long as you do so very decently as is required from a democratic society. Yes, okay, let's get going. I would like to this evening talk to you about the questions that we ask. What power does a right question hold? What would amount to a right question? How do we gauge the quality of the questions that we ask? This evening's topic, as you all know, or as you all hopefully know, is the role of the media in contemporary democratic societies. I'm delighted to see one of the most beautiful women in the country, in the land of the brave, also in our midst. Very good evening, Barbara. Welcome to you. I'm just saying hi to you. So, what I've been taught in a module called Statutory Interpretation at law school is the following. If you encounter a word, a term, there are a couple of options that you can explore to interpret exactly what it means. You could read it within context. So if this term shows up in a particular context, you could derive its meaning premised on that specific context. But the most basic and at times the most helpful tool is to consult a dictionary. What does the dictionary say about the ordinary meaning of that term? The terms I would like us to look closely at this evening relate to contemporary, but also to democracy. By a show of hands, how many of you believe that Namibia is even a democracy? Not all at the same time. Don't worry, this is a safe space. Article 21 makes sure that even an academic institution is a safe space as far as freedom of expression is concerned. Is that really the overwhelming sense that the minority of you believe that Namibia is a democracy? May I accept that? You don't think that Namibia is a democracy? Okay, let's pause and park that for a moment. I would like to go to contemporary. So contemporary implies a few things as per the concise Oxford Dictionary. It speaks to something being alive, something moving. Dr. Nikondo rightfully referred to the media as needing to be dynamic. A democracy, if you still believe Namibia isn't one, is one where a system of governments is the order of the day for the people, by the people. That means that country, that jurisdiction, that constituency gets to choose who will be holding the power over them. And that very constituency, those very people get to hold those people they elected into power accountable. We know that the head of state identified this very 2019 as the year of accountability. We have a responsibility to also hold him and his government and his current and former ministers, including the former Minister of Education, Arts and Culture, accountable. And to what extent do we actually do that? So I would like us to move into what role do we as the media have to play in contemporary democracies. Allow me to assume that Namibia is indeed a democracy. I feel a bit more comfortable with that assumption at this moment. Mr. Smith from the Popular Democratic Movement is also in our midst to make sure that that democracy stays alive, to make sure that the values of, amongst others, accountability gets upheld. So also thank you for your presence, sir. Not too long ago, we had a situation with one of the weekly newspapers called The Patriot. They wanted to expose what the Central Intelligence Service does with taxpayers' money. They wanted to expose that as per their understanding of the material at their disposal, the money was not being used for the intended purpose. And what we might also know is that the Central Intelligence Services retaliated and took the Patriot to court to try and bar them from reporting on these extracurricular activities. Both the High Court and subsequently the Supreme Court found in the favor of the Patriot. Very often what what government institutions in particular do, they would say, in light of the sensitivity of this information, in light of the national interest that might be jeopardized when this information lands in the public domain, we're not allowed to write about it, we're not allowed to report on it. And part of the contemporary element of this democratic society is that there is sufficient separation of powers between the three main organs of state. Those, as per the supreme law of the land, relate to the judiciary, the executive, and the legislature. So the courts independently found that the Central Intelligence Services had no case. I would just like to take one slight step back to Article 21 that Dr. Nkondo also referred to. What we need to bear in mind, and that's very important. Chapter 3, that accommodates our Bill of Rights in the Namibian Constitution. Mine is in a slightly dilapidated state, but I still try to uphold the Namibian Constitution as the supreme law of the land. Makes provision for certain fundamental rights and freedoms. But not all of those fundamental rights and freedoms are enshrined. What on earth does that mean? So if fundamental rights and freedoms are enshrined, that means irrespective of what happens in this country, irrespective of what the prevailing circumstances are, those particular rights can never be done away with. One such right that is enshrined refers to the right to dignity. That's inviolable. So even if you are arrested, even if you find yourself behind bars, that right still needs to be upheld in terms of our constitution. Whether that is the case in practice remains open for discussion. But the right relating to freedom of expression, both as far as the press is concerned, but also as far as academic institutions are concerned, is not an unchanged right. That means that there are inherent limitations relating to that right. What we must know, even as media students, that we're not allowed to defame anybody. We're not going to talk about defamation at great length, but it's something to bear in mind that the right relating to freedom of expression as per Article 21 of Chapter 3 of the Namibian Constitution is not an unchanged right. I would like us to look at a few other examples relating to the Namibian context. So we already spoke about the example relating to the Patriot. Not too long ago, we experienced something that could be regarded as a type of bomb on social media. It contained the figure 2%. Do we know about the 2%? Have we been paying our 2%? We might be saying that we students, we don't have to pay our 2%. We do know that in the meantime, although the initial brief related to all workers having to contribute 2% of 1 month's wage, it has in the meantime shifted to 2% of anyone who has access to an income. So as a student, you need to calculate what 2% of your pocket money is per annum. And government would really like you to donate that towards, amongst others, drought relief. Are you willing to do that as a student? Are you not? Okay, have you already paid your 2%? Yeah. I must have it to pay it. I don't have it, so how can I pay it? So, how do we hold government accountable? How do we make sure that what they do is right in terms of the responsibility towards society? Initially, the 2% landed in the public domain when a letter leaked out between the office of the Prime Minister and the unions. Now, we do know in 2019 There's no secret anywhere. There are things like screenshots. Everything that you put on paper will be leaked. Is that so? And to what extent did we comply with our responsibility as the media when we revealed that and that landed in the public domain? As far as SADC is concerned, Namibia's democracy is alive and happening, but we can do more as far as taking up and taking charge of our responsibility as the media. What happens in neighboring South Africa at times presents itself in quite an aggressive, violent way, but there they really don't hold back at all. They take charge, they expose. The commissions of inquiry actually have results that are communicated, and people are publicly held accountable, including former heads of state. I hope I can address a bit of what's left during the question and answer session. All the slides and the additional information will also be made available to you at the appropriate platforms through the organizers. I just want to say the following. Even if many of you, by the show of hands, might not believe that this is a democratic society, on paper it definitely is. As per the supreme law of the land, it definitely is. And we all have a responsibility to make sure that we hold the people in power accountable. As journalism students, as media practitioners, also as people teaching prospective media practitioners in the academia. That was my short and sweet take on the role of the media in contemporary democratic societies. Baie dankie, thank you very much. Tapandula unene. Perhaps a word of caution to my fellow panelists. 15 minutes feel like 2. So enjoy your 2 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Kisting. I thought that was fascinating, especially the poll for a start, and perhaps a little bit worrying. I've been in the media profession a while, and I think if in the 90s or early 2000s you ran the same poll, I think the majority would have put up their hand and said Namibia is a democracy. So quite an interesting thing that we can discuss a bit about during the question and answer. I also thought it was interesting your discussion around the Patriot. That really was an example of what the media still can do, even with the constraints that we do face, to hold the organs of state, even traditionally very secretive organs of state, such as the intelligence service, accountable. Thank you very much. I would now like to call upon Mr. Kaithembwa Shiparuro. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Some of us have heard your name through many years of reading various media. You're welcome to give us your address.
Mr. Ellis, should I say it's part of your democratic right, perhaps, in your own interpretation, to misread my name or otherwise? It's granted in a democracy. I haven't prepared anything because, as you have been told, I was just drafted in at the last minute to come in. But having an experience of close to 30 years, this is a subject that I can speak about off the cuff. The topic that we have been given is the role of the media in democratic societies. I was questioning that. Why should we come here and talk about the role of the media in democratic society, while we have got a society of ourselves, of our own in Namibia? Why could the subject or the topic not be what is the role of the media in the Namibian democratic society whether you define whether Namibia is democratic or not. Now, talking about democracy, there is no question whether Namibia is a democracy or not, because there are a few tenets of what constitute a democratic society. Like, for instance, having free and fair elections that we have been having in Namibia since independence. So there can be no question whether Namibia is a democratic society or not. On top of that, Namibia has got a constitution which defines the various power vested in the three arms of government, which is the legislature, which is the judiciary, and which is the executive. That has been at play. It has even tonight been alluded to that the court was able to express itself in terms of, what limit the government can go or not. That is a typical example of a democratic society. Perhaps the question that we should be asking ourselves is whether we have got a functioning democracy or not. That should be the question, whether we don't have a democracy or not. Now, coming to the role of the media, we are living in an era of an explosion of media organization. So talking about the role of the media in a democratic society is a very broad subject, because given the diversity of the media, each media has a role that it fulfills. Because I have got my own little, pamphlet, that is a media. Now, would you expect that little pamphlet of mine to play a role within the national consensus politics? No, not at all. So therefore, ideally, we should have, trimmed down this concept to perhaps the main titles in the country, like the leading newspapers. Not to say that the other media do not have their role or not. When we're talking about what could be the role of the media within any given society, it depends on what theory of the media you employ or you subscribe to, because there are various theories of the media. One of the most celebrated theories of the media is the Marxist theory of the media, which says, the media is there to give voice to the ruling elite. Now, in contemporary society like in Namibia, when we're talking about the ruling elite, I'm sure most of you would hasten to point out the finger or to think about the government. No, the government is not the ruling elite. It is part of the ruling elite. We have got business. Can I remind you, perhaps many of you might have read the book by Professor Noam Chomsky, The Requiem of the American Dream, where he talks about, about 10 principles in a modern democracy, all principles which does not add to democracy but reduce towards it. One of those principles is shaping ideology, and the other principle is engineering consensus. Now, how is this ideology shaped? And how is this consensus engineered? Obviously, through the media. Now, depending on which theory of the media you subscribe, you could be, as much as you consider yourself part of the media, you could also be part of the ruling elite. So it takes consciousness. It does not mean because just you work for one or the other title, necessarily you are not part of the ruling elite. No. And these are a little few observations and food for thought that we could belabor the whole evening. And as I was saying, mine is just, short remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I didn't even have to get out my notes saying 5 minutes to go or 3 minutes to go. So thanks very much for a short and very informative address. I think our theory of the media is often something we take for granted in public discussions. We often assume a kind of liberal theory of the media, and we don't get into discussions perhaps of what would Marxist theory say, what would also developments and adaptations in Marxist theories such as the Frankfurt School have to say. Hopefully we'll hear a bit more about that later. But I think it's an interesting question, something to ponder. We may have a democracy, we may have the constitution, we may have the laws on the statute books, but do we have a functioning democracy? So thanks for bringing that question to our attention. Our next speaker is Dr. Nicole Hess from Switzerland. She has also been around the world and contributed to, I think, many media you heard in the introduction, and many non-governmental organizations. And I now give the floor to her. You're welcome.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure and also my honor to be invited this evening to this panel discussion about the role of the media in contemporary democratic societies. And to talk about this issue is, I think, even more important as we live in a time of radical changes. We have in different countries social and political polarization. As you already mentioned, we are in a time of digital revolution, and there is, if you are looking to the media, there is a strong concurrence between classical media and social media. So you have heard, I am from Switzerland. I worked there for about 12 years as editor of 2 in Zurich-based daily newspapers, Neue Zürcher Zeitung and Tagesanzeiger. And I thought it would be interesting, perhaps, that I could open for you a window to what is the current media situation in Switzerland. So, I would like to talk about first of all, the characteristics of Switzerland, because I think also in Namibia the characteristic of your country is very important to the relation to the media. Then I would like to talk about the relation between politics and media, then give you some insight to the media landscape in Switzerland and their financing. And also I would like to talk about the challenges we face at the moment and new ideas that we are thinking about and new models. So as you might seen, this is Switzerland, and our country is divided in 4 cultural sections and also 4 languages. So we have 4 official languages. You see that the red part, this is the German-speaking part. The blue part, this is the French-speaking part. The green part is the Italian-speaking part, and very small in the east, this is the Rhaeto-Roman part, which means this is a minority people living in the mountains there. And we are, I would say, one of the eldest democracies in the world. We are a direct democracy, which means a lot of responsibility for the citizens. And we are a very small size of state. In Switzerland live about 8.4 million of citizens overall. So when it comes to what kind of media do we have, in theory we are named as one of the countries which leads the democratic corporatist model, which means we had an early development of so-called, sorry, I was not very precise, I was further on. We had an early development of press media and a high market range. But what is very important, historically seen, we have a high significance of so-called party-affiliated print media, which means when Switzerland was, what is the word in English? I'm sorry. Was gegründet, was founded, yes, in 1848. This was also the time when the first press medias came out, and there was medias for the Catholic people, medias for the liberals, and a bit later on for the working class. And we have a strong regulation of media, and we are oriented towards information, towards commentary, and we try to be neutral in our medias. When you look to Switzerland, we have a large diversity of types of print media. I noticed them. It's regional subscription newspapers, we have national quality newspapers, we have commuter magazines, we have tabloid newspapers, we have Sunday papers, we have political weekly newspapers and local newspapers. So this is really, we have to make a choice. Which newspaper do we read? And yeah, I think this is a luxurious situation we have. So what is the amount of titles and circulations we had in the last year? You see, we had about 309 titles overall. This means the German, the French, the Italian, and the Rhaeto-Roman speaking part of Switzerland as a whole. But what you can see also is that our circulations are falling down. And this is one of the challenges we have. When you look to the history of media, for all print media in Switzerland, I would say there are two important milestones. The one was, as I already said, when Switzerland was founded. So the medias were then in a close relationship to the modern state of Switzerland, and at the same time was also guaranteed the freedom of media in our federal constitution. And as I already told you, there were newspapers for all parties which were involved in the foundation of our country. there was a huge step in the development of media in the 60s and 70s of the last century. That is to see together with the revolution of '68 we had in Europe and also in the United States. And values changed there. And there were no more the political parties important on what was written in the newspaper, in their own newspapers, but it was asked for independence, political independence, and also diversity of opinion. And one newspaper I worked for, the Tagesanzeiger, was one of the pioneers of this new kind of newspaper that was built up on the Anglo-Saxon model, which means we had a large range of different forms in the newspaper. Background articles, reports, interviews, and so on. And what is still very important to us, we have a strict separation of report and commentary. This is because what I said before, we would like to be neutral. So it has to be clear what is the objective report and what is the commentary of an editor. This also means these steps that newspapers were divided in different departments. There was a department for international news, for Swiss news, for culture, for sports, and so on. And this model is still present now. I would like to give you the insight also to radio and television, because I think this is, when we look to the question about the panel this evening, this is an important issue. I put you a quotation of Mr. Roger de Weck. He was the Director General of the Swiss Radio and Television Corporation, and he said, in our country with 4 official languages, the SRG has the governmental mission to contribute to the federal cohesion as well as to the political and social formation of opinion. So this means radio and television, they play a very important role for our country, for bringing together the different cultures and languages. In the radio, we have three radio programs. Number 1 is for information and entertainment, number 2 is for culture, and number 3 for the young people. And the mission consists in information, education, enlightenment, and entertainment. Radio might be about 100 years old at the moment. Then to the television, which was founded in the 1950s. There are 2 programs, TV1, which is a complete program, and number 2, a complementary program. And I think the ethics standards I mentioned here, they are also very important for all kinds of media in Switzerland. So this means this is independence, this is fairness, and this is balance. Huh? What is the point? 5 minutes, okay. So this is an important point. How we finance our media. The print media, they are financed by subscription and by retail, and also by advertising. And radio, television, for them we pay fees. And I think what is, if you look to the political question, what is very important and also very typical for Switzerland, there is a financial compensation between the different parts of Switzerland. Now I come to the current challenges. We live in a very strong concentration process on a few media companies in Switzerland. We had a really hard breakdown of the advertising. So this means minus 2/3 of what comes in since the year 2000. And this meant also there were a lot of journalistic and editors thrown out of the media. We have a declining circulation in paid newspapers, and we have a growing circulation of commuter magazines, which means they are for free. And we have the competition of digital and social media. So the question I am answering is there still diversity of opinion in our country? Is there still journalistic quality? And is there still maximum independence? You can go further. Yes. One behind. What are the answers of these challenges? First off, print media, they invest a lot of money and a lot of energy in online news portals. I have seen that, for example, the Namibian and the Republican also have online portals. And there are different pay models so that you're not allowed to look at 10 or 20 or 30 articles of one newspaper online, but you have to pay for them. And then we'll come to the end. We try also out different only online newspapers. There were different tries. One you see the first one in Basel who didn't go out well. There is Watson, still online, still functioning. And the newest one, what I think is very interesting, is Republic. It's a newspaper which is paid by its own members. So this creates a society of, this is our newspaper. This is very new. One back. I would like to give you, before saying thank you to you for your attention, a last quotation, what I think, which is, I think, important for our understanding for the relation between media and democracy. The public is the place where different opinions existing in society and interests meet, where they are debated, but where is also found a common understanding. On the basis of information, discussion, critique, and deliberation, the better argument will prevail. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I thought that was very interesting. You know, back a few years ago when maybe people were very optimistic about Namibia's hopes for development, people used to say we could become the Switzerland of Africa. I don't know if that's still true or what that even meant, beyond us having a small population perhaps. But yeah, certainly things like falling ad revenue, falling circulation, the competition from the digital media, loss of jobs within the media industry. These are not things that are foreign to the Namibian media industry, and it would certainly be useful to talk and see perhaps what insights we can gain from each other. Our final panelist for tonight is my colleague, Dr. Philip Santos. Recently joined us from, I don't know if I should say UCKAR, the university currently known as Rhodes. You never know, there might be post-colonial or decolonial challenges to that name. But in any case, he is an expert in decolonial theory, as you've heard, as well as in theories relating to gender, relating to digital media. So I can do no worse than hand the floor over to him. It's all yours.
Good evening to you all. Right, being the last speaker, you will find some of what I'm going to say a bit redundant, although necessary to refer to sort of to create flow in the rest of the presentation that I'm going to make. So I'll start by mentioning some of the aspects of the relationship between journalism and democracy, which have now become axiomatic for most of us who are in the media, either as scholars or as practitioners. So the first thing that I think we could appreciate is the fact that media, journalistic media especially, which is going to be the focus of my talk, are major sources of information and also major platforms for public discussions, although this is changing because of the advent of online, particularly social media, isn't it? So I'm just mentioning these as general truisms about the relationship between journalism and democracy. The second is that engaged and active citizenship is contingent on quality information held by citizens and also the level and extent of citizen participation in public life, isn't it? And these two, especially in processes of democratization, I don't think there is any country on this planet which can confidently refer to itself as a democracy. We are all positioned at some point in the continuum between what is not democratic and fully democratic, but not yet democratic. So those countries that see themselves as democratic are actually just at advanced stages of democratization, but there are still also problems with them in one way or the other. So in democratizing societies, and also in those that regard themselves as democracies, the quality of journalism is at the center of either the process of democratization or processes of sustaining or maintaining democracies that see themselves as already established, isn't it? So that's pretty much the relationship between journalism and democracy in a nutshell, and because I'm chasing time, I will leave it at that. Now, there are changes that are happening in the media environment, particularly regarding the circulation of information, regarding public participation in deliberative activities, isn't it? And these changes are obviously, again, dependent on especially changes in technology, but they are not the only changes that are sort of engineering the sort of changes that we are seeing in society. Some of the things that have happened as a result of these changes are that there is very improved access to information both by the media and ordinary people. Channels of gathering and disseminating news have also multiplied. We are in an era without limits in terms of what the technologies can do, without limits in terms of what audiences can do, without limits in terms of who can participate in public conversations, through which platforms, and which subjects, and things like that. So we are in an era of multiplicity, in an era without limits, as a result of these technologies. So these are positive things about them. They've democratized the processes of generating, disseminating, and consuming information. In fact, there is now a very blurred line between who is a producer and who is not a producer. Audiences are as much producers as they are consumers. In some cases, the media actually follows what is happening on social media, but in other cases, we also follow the media. I myself prefer to follow traditionally established media that are known to follow very rigorous processes of verification of information, which is obviously trustworthy and credible in most cases. And a good example for me would be the BBC. Right. But there are also negative aspects to these transformations. And these include, among others, opportunities for surveillance for government, opportunities for surveillance for corporate entities, isn't it? I mean, if those of you who followed the Cambridge Analytica scandal would know what I'm talking about. Also, these new media, these changing dynamics within the media industry have expanded the scope within which corporate media organizations can pursue profit as their major focus, isn't it? As a result of some of these changes, the positive gatekeeping processes, filters that we used to associate with traditional mainstream media have been undermined in very, very significant ways. Ethical values have been undermined in very, very significant ways. And this is because most of the information that is circulating is coming from non-institutional sources, and also from hyper-commercial sources which are preoccupied with generating following through clickbait content, which content is expected to attract advertising, and obviously that has huge implications on the quality of information circulating in the public sphere, isn't it? What is also worse is that these things are happening at a time when we are witnessing challenges such as the extreme polarization in society and in politics, and even in class relations and things like that. I think that point has been alluded to earlier. We also have the challenge of post-truthism, where facts are becoming less of an important matter, but feelings have become sort of the point of political gravitas. The more you can whip up citizen emotions, the more political latitude you can get, which obviously has huge implications because it renders journalism a bit important in the sense that the very basis on which we value journalism becomes undermined, which is the importance of credible and valuable information. Other challenges that we are confronted with today in both democratic and democratizing societies include disinformation, misinformation, lack of information, circulation of fake and deep fake stories, as well as images, incivility online. People shout at each other, call each other names, threaten each other to a point where deliberative activity gets sort of paralyzed. The chilling effect, which makes people less inclined to express themselves more freely, to discuss issues that they think will attract vitriol and things like that, isn't it? We also see the application of misogynism, especially online, physical threats to journalists that especially report on corporate malfeasance, state malfeasance, and also journalists that report mainly on threats to the environment, isn't it? These journalists are constantly facing all kinds of dangers, including possibilities of being killed, isn't it? So what are we to do given this scenario that I and my colleagues have just referred to? So the government and the media, journalistic media particularly, can do the following in broad terms. The government is obviously responsible for providing an enabling policy infrastructure that enables all those things that my colleagues alluded to: a plural media, an independent media, diversity, a more representative media, and so forth, isn't it? And the media itself can produce quality information which is verified, which is reliable, and platforms that enable or facilitate productive interaction, isn't it? Not uncivil interaction, but productive interaction where people come together, debate issues out, and at the end of the day, the force of the better argument being the decider of the way forward, isn't it? Also, the media can improve or remedy this situation by performing the traditional normative roles, and here I'm going to draw on Christian's and his colleagues' outline of key normative roles to be performed by the media. The first being the monitorial role, which does not just include focus on monitoring what is happening in society, but also providing adequate information for citizens to make informed decisions about their welfare, about the things like during election time. I mean, they have to know what is at stake, who stands for what, who is likely to represent their interests and things like that. Then the facilitative role, which is obviously concerned with the deliberation, the media being a platform, providing a healthy platform through which citizens can talk about issues, deliberate those issues, guided by acceptable procedures of democratic deliberative processes, isn't it? And a normatively sound collaborative role. And collaboration is usually thought of in terms of the relationship between the media and centers of power, be they commercial or political. So when I say normatively sound collaborative role, I mean when the media cooperates with centers of power in ways that speak to issues of social justice, cordial human relations, and so forth and so forth. In other words, things that are normatively acceptable as beneficial to all people in a particular society, for humanity in general. The radical role, which means the media fighting corporate malfeasance in ways that, corporate and government malfeasance in ways that change societies into better entities. We can also think of responsibilities of the media in terms of the following. I'm going to rush through these things because of my limited time. The media, although in the thematic statement of this particular gathering, there is call for objectivity. Sometimes the media has to abandon objectivity because of things that I'm going to talk about here, when it seeks to speak about or bring people's attention to cases of maldistribution in society. In other words, the economic inequalities that exist in society to the extent that their citizenship gets undermined in one way or the other. The misrecognition of cultural groups in society in ways that undermine their full participation in society as citizens, and also the misrepresentation of different kinds of groups in society in terms of them expressing their voice regarding issues that matter to them. Then lastly, I also think that a healthy framework of discourse ethics that guide public communication can can sort of remedy the challenges that we spoke about earlier on. For instance, the media can focus on issues that are truly in the public interest, include all concerned in terms of their content, in terms of what they enable through participatory, facilitative kind of processes, and also they must accord equal communicative rights and weight to all participants' interests and evaluative orientations in society. In other words, everyone must be given equal regard in terms of the media's accommodation of social actors, political actors, and also issues that affect different kinds of groups in society, isn't it? Then the citizens and the media itself must be free from both internal and external coercion. And this is a challenge, especially on social media, where some people want to dominate conversations to a point where they constrict the participation of others in ways that are overt or covert, isn't it? So I think in a nutshell, it's a bit abstract, but I hope it can inform our discussion going forward.
Thank you very much, Dr. Santos. I'm almost tempted when you spoke about opportunities for surveillance, and I'm tempted, so I'm just going to do it. Maybe a quick show of hands. How many of you use this app, Face App, via Facebook or other social media recently? You know, the one that allows you to adjust your face so it looks like you're 20 or 30 years older. Anyone? Anyone? No, actually not a lot. Interesting. Maybe that shows that you're wise to some of the dangers of social media, and who might get hold of your data and your facial recognition data, which could perhaps be used against you. But it was, who knows by who? By the Russians, maybe, by ourselves, maybe, by our own governments, who knows, by the corporate elite. But I think it was quite interesting, the kind of redemptive vision that Dr. Santos presented. And perhaps it's going back to some of the best traditions about what the media should do. You know, verify information, look for opportunities for social change, lead a sort of national discussion. And maybe we neglected that a bit. Maybe we're trying to compete with social media in ways we can't. Maybe social media is always going to be first, or some citizen journalist with a blog is going to be first. Maybe that's no longer our role. Anyway, these are all opportunities for discussion, and I'd now like to open the floor for people who have questions. I'm sure you all have questions, and we'll take maybe 3 or 4, then we'll go back to the panelists. Do we have someone who can hand a mic around? Yeah, please raise your hand, please. Yeah, maybe we can start over there. Lady with her hand up.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis, and thank you to the panelists for your insightful inputs this evening. And by the way, thank you for the compliment, Mr. Kisting. I have a question, and one of the things that I've noticed here is the topic speaks to holding government organizations and powerful people to account. And unfortunately, and it's my opinion, your topics or what you addressed was rather anemic, I thought, on holding organizations and powerful people. It was more like the government. For example, Mr. Kisting, your examples were really focused on, if I may, on the government. And there's quite a couple of examples that I have seen in terms of corporate malfeasance, and Dr. Santos, you spoke to that. And perhaps this question is to you, Denver given that you work for NMH, but also to the other panelists. The notion of the public interest and advertisements from corporates who might actually have done various nefarious things to society. And to what extent is, for example, an organization of which you are highly dependent on its revenue, on your ad revenue, and to what extent will you report on the corporate malfeasance of said company? Thank you.
Thank you. I saw we had a hand this side. Yes, James?
I'm James Jamu. I'm a student here studying journalism and media technology. So my question is, I guess, towards any of you with a response on the panel. Given the existence of various subcultures spread across online platforms in which news is interpreted, disseminated according to these so-called neo-belief systems, how do we then engineer consensus, or more specifically, harmonize people into a shared system of interpretation? Yes, consensus. Thank you.
Okay. Zoe?
Good evening. My name is Zoe Titus. I have more than one question, may I ask? More than one question.
How many more? You can ask two.
3 questions.
Okay, make them brief.
Okay. Dr. Hess, you were very specific in saying that Switzerland practices a direct democracy, which advances a belief that citizens should be directly involved in public affairs. So to what extent is this facilitated by your media? And I hope that in your research that you have some insights into how journalists see their role in practicing journalism and the role that they play in your democratic society. You also mentioned that your media is heavily regulated. I'd like some insights into the kind of regulation that you're speaking of. Do you practice self-regulation in terms of public broadcasting? To what extent is there real public ownership of the public broadcaster? Is it a public service broadcaster? Is that understanding of public broadcasting understood? And then to Dr. Santos. Dr. Santos, you've sketched the centrality of journalism to democracy. But in your view, do you think that traditional media or the way in which journalism is practiced really serves to advance democracy and democratic ideals to the extent that citizens on the continent, or our continent specifically, enjoy the fruits of this so-called democracies, and then specifically in post-colonial societies, and then more specifically Namibia, South Africa, post-apartheid societies?
Okay, perhaps we can answer those ones before people forget the first question. Maybe we can start with you, Denver. Is the media doing enough to combat corporate, what was your word? Malfeasance, yes, as opposed to just government crime, yes.
Thank you for the question, Barbara. I think there are a few things that we need to be frank about. We need to own exactly where we are at. We need to be transparent about the status quo. We need to say that newsrooms are under incredible pressure. There's a lot of pressure from the advertising department on editorial. We need to own that. We need to be open and transparent about that. We need to be transparent about the fact that the lines have become blurred. We have a responsibility as media practitioners to the industry to hold ourselves accountable. Our audiences have a responsibility to hold us accountable. We need to be called out. Listen, you're being supported by this big corporate. This is what's been transpiring there. Why have you not reported on it? And if I don't respond as the editor, tag me online on Facebook to make sure that message is brought across. So we need to, it's a collaborative effort between various role players. Yes, self-regulation is what we advocate for from within the industry, but we're also heavily dependent on the audiences to make sure that what they consume, what they're served, as far as news is concerned, is something that complies with the ethical standards that have been set by the industry and that we need to be held to account to. I think you're very right about the power that certain powerful people hold, the power that certain corporates hold. And it's through these honest conversations and discourse and public platforms that we can see to it that it remains alive, that it remains contemporary, that we are kept on our toes throughout. It's also important to state that what amounts to the public interest is not only what's interesting to the public. So we need to revisit that definition throughout. And we need to reaffirm what exactly does it mean for something to be in the public interest. If your decisions that you based on the information at your disposal could affect your livelihood, could affect the way you live and the way you think about the society, then it would be in the public interest. But if it's something you find juicy or just interesting to talk about with your friends, it might not amount to what we believe to be in the public interest. So, short and sweet, we need to continue to have these conversations. We need to be transparent. We need to be honest. We need to own exactly where we're at. Times are very tough. But let's talk about this and let's also see how we can establish synergy, because ultimately, our salaries get paid by the advertising revenue. What we get from the selling of a paper is not sufficient to sustain the industry. Yes, we're heavily dependent on that very declining advertising revenue. So how can we best weather these storms? And also, if we drive a project that's initiated by an advertiser, by a corporate, we need to clearly communicate that too. Whether it says that somewhere in the layout, somewhere in the text, we need to own that too. Listen, this project was driven by Barbara Kachipara. She gave us X amount of Namibia dollars. This is why we decided to run with it on account of the news value that it still has. But we're communicating to the audience that it was paid for, so that I know as a news consumer in reading this is where this emanates from. I hope I'm answering your question.
I think you are.
Thank you. I'm not going to attempt James's question.
Yeah, I think the big question the media need to ask itself is whether the media has got a consensus to any national issues, or is it a matter of its media to itself with its own agenda? Has the media in Namibia ever subscribed to a national agenda? I don't think so. And that is the problem. That's why we cannot speak about the media as a unison in Namibia, other than the media each having its own agenda, whether driven by state actors or by a corporate world. So we have never developed that support within the media for a national agenda and national consensus, which is a debate that we must have in the society.
I think if I got you right, James, your question was sort of to the effect that how do we achieve consensus on social media given the multiplicity of subcultures existent thereon? And my answer would be, in a democracy, consensus is actually not a very good thing. I don't think it is possible, neither should it be desirable, that people reach consensus because of our different interests, because of our different positionalities, because of our different aspirations, and so forth and so forth. What is, I think, productive is to have what Chantal Mouffe refers to as agonistic pluralism. In other words, accepting that by virtue of our differences, we are going to disagree. But we will momentarily agree on certain issues to allow for certain social processes to move forward, and immediately after that, go back to what matters to each of our subject positions or material positions. So I subscribe more to that view than to the consensus view, because normally what passes as consensus is in real terms, a case of one view achieving hegemony and obscuring the competition, the differences, the contests that will be playing out in society. So agonistic pluralism for me would be the ideal situation to have, where we treat each other as adversaries rather than as enemies in our interactions, in our contestations, deliberations, and so forth and so forth. So I think if we start from the position that we must achieve consensus, we might have a problem, because we may never actually achieve consensus. I think it's very difficult in most practical cases of argumentation to achieve consensus in the real sense of the word. Then going to Zoe's question, does traditional journalism advance democracy in post-colonial societies such as Africa? Again, it's a very good question, but my problem with it is that it creates, it implies, it insinuates that we must have an either-or situation, either traditional media or something else, which should not be the case. Traditional media can coexist with other emergent kinds, nascent kinds of media that we have in society today, isn't it? But we have seen problems with nascent media, especially social media, the problems with disinformation, fake news, etc., isn't it? So traditional journalism becomes, when practiced properly, becomes the backdrop, the benchmark against which we can then verify information that is in the public sphere, social media and others. I mean, I know many people who would come across something on social media and say, unless if it's verified by the BBC, it's not true, isn't it? And I'm one of them. You have to wait for the BBC to broadcast it and say, oh, okay, maybe that happened.
Order of the king.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No problem. You were asking about the direct democracy in Switzerland, and what this means for the attitudes or the self-understanding of the journalists. So direct democracy means first that we have, like you also, every 4 years we have elections for the parliament and the government, but this also means that we have to vote on different subjects at about 4 times a year. And this means there has to be given a lot of information through the media to the citizens, so that they can build their own meaning about. And when I was an editor at Tagesanzeiger, for example, before a very important voting, which was discussed very hardly in politics, but also in the society, the editor-in-chief would take together his most important journalists or editors and discuss with them what kind of recommendation the newspaper should give to the citizens, to the readers, if they should vote yes for a certain initiative or not. So this means the attitude is responsible and also a political one of most of journalists in Switzerland. Yeah. And your second question was about the regulation of our media sector. And if I remember right, you asked for all about broadcast and TV. So this means, as I showed, every household in Switzerland pays a certain fee so that you can have the programs and radio and television. And for a long time, until the 1990s, there only existed national radio and television. And in the 1990s, private radios also came into the market, and there was a hard discussion also in public, on percentages, how the fees should be shared between the national radio and television, and what percentage of this money should be given to the private ones. So this is written down. This is what I meant with regulated.
Okay. I think we have another round of questions. The gentleman in the black has been waiting to speak, so go ahead.
All right. Joseph Ailonga. I've got one question. I had a very interesting conversation yesterday on issues around freedom of expression. And this is on the backdrop of what happened in Uganda with an academic that was sentenced to 18 months in prison for calling the president a pair of buttocks. I'm asking because of Dr. Santos here. You've indicated the issue around consensus, and you've indicated the issue around multiplicity of mediums. Now, I wanted to ask this question, and I'll ask it in two phases. One, is the continuation of freedoms creating a problem for society? Are we creating a problem for society when creating more room for freedoms? And the other one is the same question, but just phrased differently. The multiplicity of mediums, is that creating a problem for us? Because we've seen now that social media, as you've indicated, has created fake news, alternative truth. We can call it whatever it is that we want, deep fakes, or whatever it is that we want to call it. But are we seeing that multiplicity of mediums creating problems for society overall, and perhaps maybe diluting the quality of the media?
Shaligan?
Good evening. I am Shaligan Peterson. I'm a journalist with Namibia Press Agency and a media student. So I have two questions, building on Barbara's question. Can we be honest with ourselves? Are we doing journalism in itself justice if we do focus or do diligence, true diligence to certain cases versus the other? I'll give you an example. If we do in-depth pieces on government and their corruption or anything negative related to them, versus the same thing happening in a corporate, but much worse, are we then doing justice to journalism? Because journalism has many faces to it, but essentially it's about information. So are we really doing journalism justice by focusing on government's bad instead of, and versus a much lesser shine on corporate's bad? And my second question is, does the role of media truly come out if we have a lack of information? Some of you have touched on the lack of access to information, but in the Namibian context, if we look at it, does the role of media of the media really come out when we have a lack of access to information?
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Over there? Okay. Bear with us.
Thank you. My name is Satsang Dino. Working from Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture as a media liaison officer in the Office of the Minister. And as well, I'm a master's student in media, journalism and media technology at NUST. One of the speakers, this is just an anecdote before I get to my point. Somebody mentioned about a practical example of my former boss, the Honorable Katrina Hansi-Marwa, regarding her case. I think, in my view, that was a free and fair trial. But I want to give a question to the House. How often did we have such big cases in Namibia at that scale, but then they were not treated free and fair? And we are speaking of Namibia being a democratic country. I will leave that as an anecdote. So we also spoke, or somebody touched on the media theories that each of the media institutions apply. And in my view, I think each media houses use these theories to, depending on what objectives and goals that they want to reach out, depending from each media house that they belong to. In my view, I think it's important as media students, media professionals, and media houses to decolonize, or rather refrain in terms of criticizing Western ideas and theories, so that we come up with our own common body that will adapt to our own African media ethics that speaks to our own agenda, challenges, for example. I can give an example of Francis Kasoma from Zambia, one of our scholars, African-owned scholars that came up with his own Afri-ethics. Now, we all know that we are in the 4th industrial revolution. That comes with challenges such as digitalization, which affects our jobs. For example, also media, our own traditional newspaper are now switching to online. It also comes with challenges such as citizen journalism via social media and other mass media platforms we can mention. Fake news, propaganda known as yellow journalism, etc. I'm also glad that Dr. Santos touched on participatory theory, which there's a need, I think, to include all the levels of people from the grassroots. For instance, media, I'm not generalizing, but most cases, we see that when our own grassroots people are calling certain media to attend to their stories, in most cases, the media will rather run to a story that is being addressed by maybe a prominent person, such as maybe a minister or a president. So where do we draw a line? These people are very important if we want to change the role of media in our societies. In conclusion, I think we need to also invest more in research. So before we hold people accountable, let's do more research. I thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm Dwight Links, also a student here. My question is to the point, which is something I haven't seen yet, although the pluralistic and all other forms of media have been slightly touched on. Has there ever been any focus upon decentralization of media? Meaning, Namibia is a case study of such, where we have the most influential of our outlets based in the most metropolitan and most financially affluent sector or the geographical area of the country. But has such an experiment ever existed in the media landscape or in history of the media? And then, was it a good experiment? Yes or no? That's basic.
Thank you. Do we have one final question? Are we good? I think we're good. I don't see any hands. Okay, maybe we can start with Dr. Santos.
Okay, I'll start with your questions. Freedom creating more problems, the multiplicity of media causing more problems for society overall. These questions, the first one, I think I would answer it in terms of us weighing alternatives. If we are not happy with having more freedom, what are we happy with? Should we go back to the era of limitations? Should we limit people's access to information, people's ability to make their voices, to vent their issues through whatever platform is available to them? These freedoms, in my own opinion, are very, very important because traditional media have not been very good, they have not acquitted themselves very well in accommodating the ordinary person in public discourse, which is something that I think we can celebrate about nascent media like social media and others. Although we are witnessing other negative aspects about this media, I think for me they are more reflective of what is in society rather than what is wrong about the media. They are just things that were less visible are now more visible because sociality has moved from invisible spaces to more visible spaces. When we see interracial conflict, inter-ethnic conflict playing out on social media, we are not witnessing phenomena that are primarily defined by the medium itself, but phenomena that have always been there in society, but are only being made visible now because these voices have found vent through these technologies that we now have. So what we are faulting these media for is making those voices visible, which I think is a good thing because it allows us to quickly diagnose hotspots, differences in society, and intervene very quickly, which was not the case before. Before, you would have these things going on in society, differences, rage, but having it suppressed until it's too late to do anything about it, which has led to genocide in some cases, and so forth and so forth. So given an alternative between having more freedom or less freedom, I think I would go for the former. Then in terms of the multiplicity of media causing problems for society overall, I think the answer would almost be the same as what I've given in regard to the first question, which is that multiplicity allows those different social groups that have not found space in traditional media to express themselves through these other platforms which allow them to do so. The only challenge that we have is not all voices in society are good. I mean, if you are celebrating freedom, which is contingent on the multiplicity of media that we now experience, what we are also at the same time celebrating is the emergence and nourishment of extremist views, be they religious, be they political, be they of a racialized nature. And here, at the back of my mind, I have Nazi groups, Nazism. I mean, those of you who are following what is happening in the US, the shootings, sort of motivated by white supremacist ideas, racist ideas. And these are also subcultures. These are particular groups with particular interests, but which interests are likely to trample on other people's rights. And now the challenge is to balance the democratic forces that are manifest in these public discourses and those forces which we would be better off without. So diluting journalism, yes, there is some degree of dilution of traditional the traditional practice of journalism, but there is also complementarity between what is happening as a result of these multiple sites of communication that are emerging as a result of digital technologies and traditional journalistic practices. What was the other? Then regarding media theories and media houses using different media theories are ways of trying to make sense of how the media actually operates in real life, rather than media themselves saying, I'm informed by this theory. Media houses come up with their own ways of serving society, of doing their business, and we, the ones that study the media, formulate theories to make sense of how the media actually practice in real life, isn't it? And it is true, many media can choose to take particular standpoints depending on what they regard as their normative position in society. Some may choose the traditional model of objectivity and just report things as they perceive them, which is obviously also a fallacy, because how the media select sources, select which story to cover, and sort of all those kinds of things, sort of predispose them towards certain issues than others, isn't it? And then you have others which make themselves much more sort of positioned in their coverage of issues, choosing to report certain issues from certain positions for particular outcomes, isn't it? Then this issue of decolonizing Africa, I will end there, Dr. Ellis. Decolonizing ethics and us understanding decolonization as Africanization. Personally, I have a huge problem with that, because it's a discourse that is reproducing the same thinking that produced Africanness, blackness, whiteness. When we speak of something that is typically African, which in itself is a very problematic category, I think we are limiting our understanding of the social. Progressive forces in Africa, whether they are of a decolonial nature or otherwise, must connect with progressive forces from the global north and other places, and from that sort of try to develop a new kind of sociality, a new kind of ethical reference point which speaks to the dignity of the human being, no matter the color, no matter the culture, no matter the geographical location. So personally, I mean, it's a question of opinion. I don't subscribe to a decolonial project that is particularist, that defines Africans in ways that separate them from the rest of humanity. I subscribe to a decolonial project that makes Africa and Africans part of the human community rather than a separate part of the human community. And this requires us to transcend racial categorization and other such processes.
Yeah, I just want to reflect on what Dr. Saunders finished with. We should make a distinction between a theory and ethics. They are completely two different things. Theories is an analysis and an explanation of why the media in any particular society operate the way they operate. Ethics has got to do with what kind of standards in their operations the media applies. Now, I don't have a problem with African ethics when it comes, to the way the media look at issues. And the case in point is what, unfortunately, is Mr. Ilonga is still here. His reference of a pair of buttocks. Now, in a political sense and in a highly developed society, there is nothing wrong with that. But in a highly cultural African society, there could be a problem. So we, as journalists, we must be careful with and be sensitive within the culture that we are operating on. Like, for instance, a typical example is as an African, would you go to a funeral where people are crying and you want to take pictures of people crying? In a typical Western society, that is nothing. That is part of the sensational journalism of the West. But in an African sense, where people are mourning, can you really comfortably, take pictures to do what with it? So it's different, ethical application based on different cultural settings that we should be aware of as journalists in a practical sense. There was a question about whether journalists can properly perform their duties in the absence of an access to information. Obviously, ideally, when journalists have access to the relevant information to be able to compile their articles and to inform their stories, that is an ideal situation. But could we say currently access to information is actually the main problem that we as journalists cannot do our job properly? No, I cannot say so. Because you would find a journalist going to a media conference, he or she goes back to the newsroom, and that story is basically based on that information from that media conference without able to delve deep into the story and see that no, but my story is not necessarily what is contained in this media release, but I've got a different story here that I can follow. So there are massive opportunities, even based on a simple media release that you get. You could do a lot of that and dig information without necessarily being prohibited or denied access to information.
I was going to say, please give my senior a bells. Thank you very much for those interventions. I'm sure the community on our online platforms are enjoying the invigorating and contemporary nature of the conversation. Just very briefly, it's a pity that Mr. Ilongo has now left in the meantime. What I wanted to say to him is that what we can thank our buttocks about is that we're dealing with civil defamation in Namibia, not criminal defamation. That probably would have served as a deterrent, because what we see, particularly in social media, unabated defamation all the time. As far as Ms. Peterson, who's also left in the meantime's question is concerned, she wanted to know, do we adequately reflect all the rot in the private sector, as Barbara wanted to know earlier too? The simple answer is no, of course we don't. The Anti-Corruption Act, if we don't know that, is not only aimed at targeting graft within the public sector, it's also aimed at graft within the private sector. But how much do we, as citizens of the land of the brave, do to make sure that the rot is exposed everywhere? Perhaps it's because the government deals with public funds, it's our money that's being used for various purposes, that we're more aware of what's happening there. But we're right, we're not doing enough to expose the rot everywhere. Mr. Nyidingwa has also left in the meantime. I was going to say to him, part of promoting transparency and access to what's happening in the country in a democratic society, Namibia Media Holdings was privileged recently to live stream the proceedings in the judgment of the former Minister of Education, Arts and Culture. And one of the key motivations behind that is that we were able to bring justice to the people. And what's also sad is to then learn how ignorant we are about these processes. But it's only if we make these processes accessible that we can educate ourselves and we can make more informed decisions about our democracy. Lastly, Mr. Links, I'm happy to hear that you find the Namibian capital to be a metropolitan, financially affluent space. That's not my view, but that doesn't matter, right?
Any last remarks, Dr. Hess?
Just I would say the lady who has left about her question about the private sector and the government, I really agree that these two parties should be looked at the same with a very critical eye.
Thank you very much. Can we have a round of applause for our panelists, please? I was asked, I'm conscious of time, I was asked to give a quick wrap up, a quick summary. And basically, I'll keep it very short. I was given 10 minutes, maybe I'll take 5. One thing I tell some of my first-year journalism students is journalism is very easy and very complicated at the same time. You know, anyone who's told a story in a bar has done a form of reporting. So you can say journalism is easy. On the other hand, you can say the practice of journalism as a public craft, as something that influences democratic processes and processes within the state, gets very, very complicated very quickly. And it gets dependent on very many issues, very many points of view, very many debates. I'm sure we could go on all night. I hope you will come and approach our panelists with questions. I think some of the key issues that have been raised include what kind of theory do we use to analyze the media? What kind of ethics do we have as the media? Is our role still to be first with the news, or is it something else? Do we define our role still in traditional terms as being super objective, being neutral, or are we something else? Are we more towards interpreters, maybe? The question of social media and the digital revolution came up. The comparison between Switzerland and Namibia, I think, is an interesting one. Even though a European society and very developed, there's probably a lot more that can be said, even concerning the histories of our media. I think a lot of our media were set up as very partisan media, at least initially. Maybe they are changing now, or maybe they haven't. Maybe they're taking on a more public service approach, but you could argue it either way. It was, I think for me, very interesting to hear about some of the challenges with regard to social media, the polarization, the misogyny, some of the racism. It's interesting that some of these shooters in the United States, in these mass shootings, have been posting before they went and did their acts, they posted manifestos on Facebook and other places. And also I think his vision of the way forward, the media taking perhaps more traditional, let's say a traditional role as guarantors of truth, as monitors, as facilitators of social progress. I'd like to thank you all for your questions. They remain ongoing debates. Whether you can refer to the president as a pair of buttocks or not, I don't know. Whether that's the result of changing public discourse for the good or the bad, I don't know. In many societies, it would have got you locked up in the past. Some in Europe as well as Africa, I think. It's good that we continue having these discussions. And once again, I'd like to suggest you all follow up with any interested points with our esteemed panelists. Without further ado, I'd like to call on Ms. Octavia to give a vote of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Octavia Timbes, and I am the project coordinator for MyZone, which is the youth brand under Namibia Media Holdings. The media is central to democratic societies, as it gives society a mirror with which to not only be introspective, but allow us to experience the spheres of society outside our own. It not only serves to hold those in power accountable, but speaks to the core of democracy by giving the public a voice, a platform where they can share their concerns, beliefs, and circumstances. At this juncture, I want to thank the University of Namibia, Science and Technology, for providing a platform for your students and the public to engage with experts on different terms and different topics regarding democracy and also media. I also want to thank B360 Education Partners. Thank you for adding value to the Namibian education at NUST, and also Namibia Media Holdings for not only broadcasting this live, but also giving those up north and south and far as Katima Mulilo to engage and watch this live stream. Thank you very much. For the panelists, we really appreciate you for taking out your time. Mr. Denver Kisting, thank you very much. Dr. Philip Santos, thank you very much. Mr. Guy Sempua Chiparura Ruro, thank you very much. Dr. Nicole Hess, thank you very much, ma'am. Really appreciate you. If you still want to watch and study and look at their presentations, you can go on MyZone on Facebook and you can listen. And if you want to contact them, it's easy to get hold of these people. You can inbox them and you can read more about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
The Namibia University of Science and Technology is driven by its vision to be a premier university, preparing leaders for the knowledge economy. The university remains committed to being responsive, creatively meeting the needs of students, society, and the economy through multiple pathways for excellent education, applied research, innovation, and service in collaboration with stakeholders. Situated in the center of the Windhoek city, the university boasts state-of-the-art facilities to support its teaching and learning, research, and services. To achieve the socio-economic goals set for Namibia in Vision 2030, the university offers 90 under- and postgraduate market-driven qualifications, developed in close collaboration with the industry, national and international partners through its 6 faculties. The Faculty of Computing and Informatics offers bachelor's, bachelor honors, master's, and PhD qualifications in computer sciences and informatics. As one of the oldest faculties on campus, the Faculty of Engineering hosts the Material Testing Institute that provides advanced education through the continuous professional development, applied research, and consultancy in different engineering projects. The Faculty of Health and Applied Sciences provides professional programs aimed at improving public health through diagnosis, patient care and management, emergency medical care, and care for the environment, as well as natural sciences, mathematics, and statistics. The Faculty of Human Sciences consists of the departments of Communication, Languages and Education, and Social Sciences, and offers, amongst others, qualifications in journalism and media technology and criminal justice. The Faculty of Management Sciences is the largest faculty and hosts 2 postgraduate units, the Harold Pupkewitz Graduate School of Business and Namibia's Graduate School of Accounting. The Faculty of Natural Resources and Spatial Sciences impart knowledge and skills in its graduates, required in the sustainable utilization and management of natural resources, contributing to a sustained national economic growth and competitiveness. The faculty's strategies and actions are aligned to ensure they remain relevant to the Namibian nation and the global society through the Integrated Land Management Institute and the Agribusiness and Technology Development Center. The university also hosts the Center for Open and Lifelong Learning, the Cooperation Education Unit, and the Teaching and Learning Unit promoting academic excellence. Research and innovation are supported by the Namibia Business Innovation Institute, the Technology Transfer Office, Innovation Design Lab, and Fab Lab Namibia. Namibia Energy Institute, NEI, a national institute founded by the Ministry of Mines and Energy, hosted at Namibia University of Science and Technology, envisages a sustainable energy supply structure based on widespread use of renewable energy. The Namibia Energy Institute is unique in that it not only is a training and capacity building institution, but also conducts research and development. It is becoming increasingly clear that the climate change is an inevitable process. Increasing climatic variability would have serious implications for the supply of food, energy and water, which forms the basis of a self-sufficient economy. The impact will be amplified through the interconnections and interdependence among these three resources, popularly known as the food-energy-water nexus. NUST intends to address the nexus challenge by investigating technology options to address food and livelihood security in both urban and rural contexts. Hence, looking into substance solutions as part of a mixed livelihood strategy, which requires an integrated model strengthened by indigenous knowledge systems linked to highly competitive technology advancement and adaptation options. Namibia is endowed with natural resources required for renewable energy supplies from the sun, wind, and biomass from invader bush. NUST will continue to contribute to the knowledge pool and clean energy development pathway in order to inform scaling up the use of renewable energy and energy-efficient technologies. NUST will advance the development of decision support software which will enable clinicians to adhere to best practices research, including research on small wireless, biomedical sensors and ultra-wideband radar technology, as well as portable ultrasound technology in support of early detection, treatment and management of diseases. The Namibia University of Science and Technology is at the forefront of investigating the next decade of operational and commercial reality in logistics. Namibia University of Science and Technology, research for impact, the hub of innovation, an institution par excellence.